What's up guys, Josh here. So KEF Q150s, supposedly the successor to the KEF Q100s. Okay, so there's a couple different aspects to the speaker that I want to cover in just a second. For now, I want to address, I think it was Wednesday's first impressions of the ELAC UB5. So in that video, a lot of people were asking, and rightfully so, although I do end up feeling like a broken record if I say it every single video. It does get a little bit redundant and a little bit old. But people were asking about what amplifier I was using. So I'm actually using a Rotel, that's R-O-T-E-L, RX1050. So a Rotel RX 1050, whatever you want to call it. It's a, if you don't want to look it up, it's about a 100 watt Class A amplifier, 100 watt into 8 ohms. This is actually an 8 ohm speaker, by the way. Now, one of the cooler things about the Rotel is that it can actually play 2 sets of speakers at once. So it has 2 sets of binding posts, and you can either hot switch between, binding post A and binding post B. You can play both at the same time if you're into that. But it's going to be good for not only reviewing, because it's a pretty solid, little amplifier, especially in the 230 square foot room that I'm in. People are also asking about that. So 230 square feet is about what this room size is, not including any openings. But it's also going to be really good for videos like are coming in the future for comparisons. So I plan to compare these KEF Q150s to the ELAC UB5s. I do think they're relatively comparable, but of course, they're not exactly the same, but that's where the comparison comes in. And speaking of that UB5 video, I was having an issue with imaging, which literally the next day, like 9 o'clock in the morning, I solved the issue. And the issue was a little bit strange. I'm not sure exactly what is causing it. Maybe it took a revealing enough system like the ELACs to really highlight the issue. That could be one concern. But what ended up happening was I actually switched. Before I was using an old receiver for the DAC portion, doing RCA out into the Rotel and doing the power amplification section out of the Rotel using the receiver basically as a DAC. Now I am using a Geshelli Labs Enog 2 for optical out of my computer, or I'm sorry, out of my TV, and whatever source is hooked up to the TV, or I can also have multiple inputs on the Rotel there. And then doing RCA out into the Rotel. So that seemed to solve the issue. Now, what was strange is that at first I was kind of thinking, well, maybe it's like some sort of like imbalance. Maybe it's like causing it to be slightly, right channel oriented or something, maybe slightly left channel oriented, and it's stretching the imaging a little bit. Honestly, I don't know what the issue is. There's like a little bit of blurriness on one side, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the overall center image, which was very strange. So I'm not sure exactly what the issue is. It's been resolved. So I wish I'd waited one more day. But when I made that video, I had no insight that that was actually going to happen. So, hindsight's 20/20, that sort of stuff. Now, the other interesting aspect of that was that it didn't seem to affect the other speakers. And it could be that the ELACs are more revealing than the other speakers. That is one possible solution. There could be really a number of potentials, and they're not really that important if I'm being completely honest here. Okay, finally, sorry for the delay, the KEF Q150s. So I owned the KEF Q100s. I really love that speaker. What that speaker was good at was really, center image. It was great at having kind of a full and lively vocal range. Had a little bit of bass, not a ton, not a massive amount. And it had pretty good top end, especially close in at a desk. Now I can already tell you, and I haven't actually used it at a desk yet, so I won't be talking about that quite yet, but I might mention it in the review if I end up putting it on a desk. Unlike the Q100s, which seem to open up kind of at any volume, like if you had them close or if you had them far, they were able to, linearly sound pretty good. Linearly in volume. They sounded good low volume, and they sounded great at higher volumes. Now, this pair is brand new. I literally got it yesterday. I played it for probably about 4 to 5 hours, and I haven't done any hard pink noise or anything like that. I'm working from home all day, so I can't do that. So I just end up using it naturally, and then once it's burned in, I'll do the official review. So it could just be burning, but at low volumes, these are kind of they're kind of lifeless. They don't really have a lot of bass, but when you kind of feed into them a little bit, when you give them a little bit of juice, a little bit of power, they really open up. And speaking of the low end that's on here, I'm not sure if it's the difference between, how they ended up switching the front port that was here before. They put it in the rear, so it is rear ported and it does come with little base ports. And they changed the top driver and they put it a little bit more towards the center of the actual cabinet here. Now, speaking of the build and those aspects, so if you're looking for like a wife or a girlfriend approval factor, this is it. This is the only pair of headphones or speakers that my girlfriend has walked in and said, oh, those look nice. Not even shitting you. Like the only pair. So if you're looking for something that looks nice, I mean, obviously they're beautiful. I mean, look at that back there. Can't beat that. But there are a couple oddities about the design. It's a vinyl wrap and it's not smooth. It's texturized. And in fact, it has the same texturization as the ELAC UB5s, funnily enough, except this is white and that's black. And it may not be the exact same material, but it's very, very similar. So it's got this kind of line texturization to it. You can actually hear it. It's not very smooth at all. Now, this tag up here, this KEF kind of a, I don't know what you would call this, symbol. It's like a little plaque almost. In photos, I kind of hadn't made my mind up and I still haven't. Part of me likes it because it's kind of like stands out. It's a little bit different. But part of me also wishes that it was just, a clean, flat, flush line. And it really had like this flat finish to it. I feel like just that super minimalist look would fit with the rest of the vibe, and this tab sticking out is just kind of weird. It's like, okay, you're trying a little bit too hard to brand yourself. It's not like people don't already know what your speakers look like, but that is a relatively minor complaint. Now, one last thing about the front, and I haven't looked this up yet because I'm too lazy and I don't really care that much. I'm not sure if these come with grills, but mine did not, but I find the size of this bag suspicious about the grills. So it comes with the little feet that you can put on the bottom. It comes with the manual and the warranty information. But this bag is like the perfect size for a set of grills to go in here. And mine did not come with grills. And I kind of find it odd. I don't know if they ship them with grills or maybe they don't. Maybe that was part of the deal that I missed on, the $300 sale versus the $550. That's also possible. But yeah, no grills. All right, let's turn the sucker around and look at the back. Okay, so the black port and the black binding post I think are a little out of place. I really would have preferred their white KEF. I just think it would have looked super, super clean. I'm not sure how I quite feel about the vinyl wrap coming to a close around the back here, but it is the rear. Not a lot of people are going to be looking at it. So fair enough. So how do these actually sound? Well, so far, from what I can tell, they've kept just about everything from the KEF Q100s that I really liked. And what the KEFs did and what these do is have this really textured, sweetened vocal range. It's very forward. Now, I didn't have the Q100s in the same setup, so I can't speak on imaging and sound staging and the capability of that in this environment, which I was listening to. So that is going to be something that I can't really draw a comparison to. But there's also a decent amount of kind of low end grunt up into a point, and we'll talk about that in just a second. That low end is actually a little bit surprising because, these coaxial drivers, this is supposed to be, I think this is supposed to be like a 5-inch, but the rubber surround here is so thick that the actual driver ends up being like 3 3/4 or something like that. But on top of that, it's not even like a full 3 3/4 because it's a coaxial driver. So it ends up being like this really small driver, but they're able to push a decent amount of low end out of it. Although I wish the actual cone was the unit of measurement for these companies. Anyways, and I think the port on the back is doing some pretty good things for the bass response, being able to kind of hit the back wall and kind of display a little bit larger of a bass response. Now, it's not the deepest bass I've ever heard. If we're going to compare something to the $550 category, something like the Vanity Transparent Zero or Transparent 1 Encores, those are going to produce a lot more bass than these will, even in an environment as big as this, even though those are, quite a bit smaller, but they do have that passive radiator on the back that really helps with that bass response. Now, the up into a point part that I mentioned, and it could be because they're new, but when I was kind of pushing them a little bit in the bass response, there was an audible amount of chuffing out of the back. So I haven't played around yet. I just wanted to give you my raw first impressions. The review will kind of have the finalized version of this, obviously. I haven't yet played around with kind of really pulling him far away from the wall or pushing him even closer, because maybe a little bit of back pressure might help with that situation or make it worse. I'll have to kind of play with it and find out a little bit. Although I do think KEF, it seems like they designed their speakers to be used in in an average home environment, not necessarily optimal conditions, but I'll test them and see where that goes. But the chuffing was kind of a little bit surprising because I don't think the driver could quite handle the low end I was trying to throw out of it. And I think the song that I really noticed it on was I think it was Major Tom by Shiny Toy Guns, the Major Tom cover. And those low notes would hit, it would go like, and it would do the initial impact of it. It would have a solid amount of impact and visceralness to that, and good punch and body to it. But it couldn't really do like the low finishing notes off of it. It would kind of chuff after that, like the air couldn't escape the cabinet fast enough, and it was creating like a little bit of back pressure. I'm not sure if that's exactly what was happening. That's just kind of how it would sound. But again, I'll mess around with it, and burn-in might help that. Now, the other thing I noticed was the imaging on this, I think, is actually better than the Q100s from what I can remember. I did have the Q100s out here, but I didn't have them with this amplifier in this exact setup with the couch position that I currently have. It was in a little bit different position, so I can't really say for sure, but I think they've stepped the imaging game up just a tad, it seems. Or it could just be the result of those other factors. That is also possible. Now, sound staging was actually fairly good. And I was comparing them, I was shooting it kind of back and forth with the UB5s. And the UB5s have very good sound stage, very deep sound stage. The UB5s tend to bring up the background information just a little bit further into the foreground. They still sound stage deep, but it's just brought up a little bit more. It's more volume-wise, it's more obvious. Whereas the KEFs really seem to play into that dynamic soundstage where, sounds that are far away, sounds that are very minimal are far away and they're very minimal. So soundstaging depth was very good, but the total volume of those was sometimes, a little bit hard to quite capture. And then something that I said with the UB5s, which I know this is not a UB5 first impression, I already did one of those, but the immediate kind of presence of the UB5s, the immediate effortlessness as I described it, this doesn't really have that. This is a speaker that, like, when you're pushing it, you kind of know that you're pushing it. It doesn't really seem to be able to take everything you throw at it. Now, again, burn-in could change that. We will see. Now, again, to compare against the UB5s, the vocal presentation, since those are both speakers that have very good vocals, I kind of want to describe the difference a little bit. So the vocals are placed more assertively on the UB5. You have your background information, you got your right instruments, your left instruments, your 45 degrees, your whatever. But the singer is like, they're pinpoint. Okay, so they have a specific place. Now, this at this stage might have more pleasing mid-range, but it doesn't have as good placement. So it's a little bit kind of more, it's a little bit more soulful, I guess. It's a little bit more lush sounding in the mid-range, and that could just be because of the added, little bit added body to the lower end than the UB5s, which this actually does have a little bit more lower end, but it doesn't hold up as well at higher volumes as the UB5 does. But then the vocals kind of flip-flop with the UB5 having like much better kind of top end extension for vocals, and it seems to be able to present that top end in a more hearty way. But I'll actually do an official comparison between these two, and I'll have a lot more to say once they're both broken in, once I really get a lot of listening time with them. And I think that's going to wrap it up because it sounds like they're doing yard work. So thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you could hit that like button if you liked the video. If you loved it, subscribe, hit the bell notification, get notified for future videos. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions. And let me know if you have any experience with any of these speakers, what you think about them, what speakers you think they beat, what speakers beat these. I'm really curious of you guys' feedback. And also, I've started kind of revamping Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and my Patreon. And I'm doing a little bit more active stuff on there. So if you could follow me, there's links in the description down below to everything I talked about. All right, guys. My name's Josh. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.